I've dealt with droughts, coyotes, and a tornado that once took half my barn roof clean off, but none of that ever made me as mad as what I found parked on my land one Saturday morning. My name's Travis Ray Boone, and I run a working cattle ranch on the outskirts of Maple Rock, Texas. Land's been in my family since 1911. About a year ago, a shiny new HOA development called Sage Hills popped up just down the road. Cookie cutter homes, zero lot lines, and people who act like a rooster crowing is a personal insult. I kept my distance, figured they'd stay on their side of the barbed wire and I'd stay on mine. I was wrong, real wrong. That morning, I came out to check the south pasture and found a line of SUVs, Teslas, and even a golf cart parked right on my gravel drive. Not on the road, not near it, on my land. Hood deep into my fence line, blocking my gate. One lady even had the nerve to back her Lexus up over my livestock scale like it was a speed bump. I stood there, blinking at the madness, trying to process what I was seeing. I thought maybe it was a mistake, some festival I didn't hear about, maybe a church event. But when I asked one of the drivers what they were doing, she said dead serious. "Oh, this is HOA overflow parking. We were told it's fine." I laughed. I thought it was a joke, until she pointed to a brand new wooden sign staked right at the edge of my property. Sage Hills Community Parking. Property managed by HOA. Violators tiled. I blinked so hard I thought my eyeballs might dry out. They didn't just park here. They'd claimed my land, like it was some open field for their minivans and jogger strollers. I marched over to the sign, yanked it out of the dirt, and tossed it onto the bed of my truck like it was radioactive. Then I walked back over to the Lexus lady and asked her again, real slow this time, "Who exactly told you this was HOA parking?" She said, "Mr. Kessler, the HOA president. He said the land wasn't being used and was public utility space." I almost choked. Public, utility, my land, my grandfather's land, the same land I pay taxes on, graze cattle on, and work from sunup to sundown. This wasn't just ignorance, it was theft in a necktie. I went straight to Sage Hills, stormed into their little community welcome center like I was kicking open a saloon door. The receptionist blinked at me like she'd never seen boots with dirt on them before. I asked for Kessler. She radioed someone. 10 minutes later, out comes HOA President Todd Kessler Cockys, loafers and the kind of grin you only see on politicians or car salesmen. I introduced myself, laid out what happened, and waited for an apology. What I got instead was a shrug, and we understood that strip of land wasn't actively used and therefore could be converted under community right of access. I stared at him like he'd just tried to sell me snow in August. "Community right of access?" I asked. "This isn't a sidewalk. It's a ranch. My ranch." He pulled out a Mapsum printout from the county website and said, "This strip here? It's unlabeled on the digital zoning report." So we assumed it was unclaimed. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Son," I said, "that unclaimed strip has hosted more cattle than your subdivision has people. You think just because Google Maps doesn't label it, you get to call dibs?" He smirked. "Well, we've already told residents it's available, so it would be disruptive to backtrack now." Disruptive. He said disruptive, as if me reclaiming my own land was an inconvenience to their HOA newsletter plans. That's when I decided, no talking, no arguing, no back and forth emails or county clerk visits. These people wanted to treat my land like a parking garage? Fine. They were about to pay the toll. I left without another word. No threats. No shouting. Just a long, quiet walk back to my truck. Because the thing about ranchers, we don't waste energy on noise. We work, we plan, and we know how to let the land do the talking. If Kessler and his HOA wanted a battle over whose name belonged on that dirt, they were about to get an education in what happens when you mess with a man who's got generations of sweat and blood in the soil. They didn't just cross a line, they paved over it, and now it was my turn to dig it back up. I spent the next 24 hours making calls, pulling old paperwork, and dragging out every survey, map, deed, and title I could find in my storage shed. My great-uncle Jeb had kept everything bless his paranoid soul. Handwritten notes, stamped county maps, receipts for fencing wire from 1953. And in that pile of history, I found exactly what I needed. A signed county survey from 1984, clearly marking that gravel access road and fence line as part of my ranch boundary. In ink, with coordinates, which meant Todd Kessler's little printout from the county website wasn't just wrong, it was laughably wrong. I made copies, laminated them, and posted one right at the gate where their little community parking stunt had been pulled. Then I put the cattle back in that pasture. That's right, full herd. 30 head of longhorns grazing right where the Teslas had been the day before. I didn't say a word to anyone, I just let the land return to its purpose. And wouldn't you know it, by the next morning, I had a crowd. Half the HOA residents standing at the edge of the road, snapping pictures and yelling things like, "You can't do this," and "This is a public safety issue." I just tipped my hat and said, they were here first. That afternoon, Kessler returned, this time with a clipboard and a real twitch in his jaw. He didn't even bother with a fake smile. "Mr. Boone, you're creating a hazard," he snapped. "Children walk here." I looked behind him at the wide paved sidewalk his neighborhood had been built with, the one that had nothing to do with my property. "Then they ought to keep walking," I replied. He waved his clipboard like it meant something. "This will be reported to the county. You're creating an obstruction." I smiled. "That's funny, because according to this, I held up my laminated deed. This land is mine. And livestock has right-of-way under Texas Code 14 Sandier Art Den. I suggest your residents brush up on it before one of them tries to pet a longhorn." He tried to argue, but I cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell your people to stop parking on my land. You're going to take down every sign you posted, and you're going to issue a written apology for unauthorized use of private property. You've got 3 days." He laughed nervous, wheezy. "Or what?" I leaned in, low and slow. "Or I start billing you per hoof print, and you won't like the hourly rate." I figured that'd be the end of it, but I should have known better. HOAs don't admit defeat. They double down. The next morning, I found a flyer stapled to my fence post, fluttering in the wind like a middle finger. "Community vote. Shall we request eminent domain designation for disputed land parcel at South Ridge Access? Meeting Tuesday." My blood boiled. Eminent domain? These people were trying to vote my land away like it was a bake sale. Never mind that an HOA has no legal power to declare eminent domain. It was the principle. They weren't just ignoring my rights, they were trying to rewrite the rules in real time. So I called up my cousin Paul, who works at the local news station. He owed me for pulling his truck out of a ditch 2 winters back. I gave him the whole rundown, photos, documentation, flyer included. That night, the story aired under the title, "O tries to seize rancher's land for parking owner responds with cattle." The clip went viral faster than cow pies at a square dance. Comments flooded in. People were outraged. Memes were made. One had a picture of my longhorn chewing grass next to a Lexus with the caption, "Parking not validated." The next day, my phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, bloggers, a local radio station even invited me to speak on air. But the best part, the county commissioner called me directly. Told me the HOA had no standing to pursue eminent domain and that my land was 100% protected under private ownership. He even offered to send a formal letter affirming my boundary rights. I told him to make it 2 copies sewn for me and 1 to staple to the hood of Kessler's golf cart. I didn't actually do that, but the thought made me grin all the same. The HOA canceled their vote, issued a clarification on their newsletter that read more like an obituary. But I wasn't done, because I just learned something valuable. They weren't just clueless. They were arrogant enough to try this again. So I decided it was time to teach them a permanent lesson known they'd never forget, and one that wouldn't require a single word from me. Just fences, just gates, and a brand new sign that read, "Private Working Ranch. Trespassers may be charged in steaks." After the news segment aired, things didn't quiet down, they boiled over. For every person cheering me on, there were 2 HOA residents foaming at the mouth. Apparently, they weren't used to being told no, especially not by a mud-covered cowboy with a chip on his shoulder, as one woman put it on the neighborhood Facebook group. I printed that quote and stuck it on my barn wall, right next to my grandfather's branding iron. You don't insult a man's boots when you've been stomping around in his backyard uninvited. And while they flailed around trying to spin damage control, I made moves. Fast ones. I hired a welding crew from upstate to install a reinforced steel cattle, gate 8 feet high, motion activated, keypad entry. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted the HOA to see it. To know that line between their prefab utopia and my working ranch was now locked, alarmed, and staring them in the face. I also extended my fence line 3 feet back still on my land, but close enough to make them sweat. Just enough that every time they walked past, they'd feel the border pressing in on them like a reminder, this land fights back. They called it aggressive, said the gate was intimidating, and not in line with the community's visual standards. I nearly spit out my coffee reading that one. Standards? You mean like when they claimed my pasture for parking, when they dug their car tires into my hayfield and told their kids to play on my fence like it was monkey bars? Funny how nobody cared about visual standards until the view included a rancher who wouldn't roll over. The new gate wasn't just metal, it was a message. And just in case that message wasn't clear, I installed a solar-powered camera rig on the post, motion activated, real-time feed, straight to my phone. Every time someone walked near it, I got a ping. First day it went up, 32 pings. Most of them just gawkers, one or two bold enough to peer over. But it didn't matter. The gate did its job. It made it clear. The era of open access was over. My land wasn't your driveway. My fence wasn't your jungle gym. And my cattle, well, they didn't care about your HOA policies. They only respected the land, just like me. But even with the fence up, the gate sealed, and my title posted online for the world to see, the HOA wasn't done. These people had the audacity of a raccoon in a pie shop. 1 week later, I got a letter hand-delivered, certified. A formal request from the Sage Hills Architectural Review Committee demanding the removal of my gate due to non-compliance with community standards regarding fencing, aesthetics, and color. I laughed so hard, I nearly fell off my porch. Community standards? For land they don't own? I called Marley Loyrand. He nearly choked on his sandwich when I read him the letter. You're not even in their HOA, he wheezed. How do they think they have jurisdiction? I said. They think everything past their sidewalk is theirs now. He told me to ignore it. I didn't. Instead, I blew the letter up to poster size, framed it, and hung it on the gate itself, right next to a new sign I'd had made just for the occasion. Private land, not subject to HOA standards. Approval not required. Trespassers will be composted. It was dramatic. It was a bit much. And it was perfect. By sundown, photos of the gate were all over town. Again. But this time, the tide had turned. Other folks started reaching out, people who'd been bullied by their HOAs for growing tomatoes, for parking work trucks, for having more than one flag in their yard. Turns out, my little feud had touched a nerve. One guy from 2 towns over drove out just to shake my hand. Said, "You gave us all hope, man. They treat us like we don't own our own homes." That stuck with me. Because that's what this was about from the start, not just land, not just boundaries, but ownership. The right to stand on your soil and say, this is mine, not yours, not the board's, mine. The HOA had tried to erase that with signs and bylaws and smug letters. But you can't bulldoze history. Not without a fight. And I still had plenty of fight left. Because this land, it's got my name in its roots. And I don't care how many committees vote or how many newsletters get printed in my ranch isn't going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. About a week after the framed letter stunt, I noticed something strange: construction markers near the edge of my east pasture. Little orange flags, fresh spray paint on the dirt, and a couple of hard hats poking around with clipboards like they owned the place. At first, I thought maybe it was county workers checking on the drainage lines. But when I walked over and asked what they were doing, the guy in charge said, "We're prepping for the HOA's new overflow parking pad, just expanding into this unzoned strip here." I nearly dropped my coffee. Come again? He pointed to the same damn patch of land we just spent 3 weeks fighting over. Our client says it's HOA managed. It's been cleared for temporary surface development. My fists clenched. Your client is a liar, I said. This land's privately owned. You're standing on Boone Ranch. I've got 4 generations of proof and a legal ruling that says so. The guy blinked, pulled out a tablet, and showed me a map. Yep, there it was again. A digital plot with fuzzy borders and no owner listed, just a little tag that said public utility. It was the same garbage Kessler had shown me. Different day, same war. I called Marlon on the spot, sent him photos, told the workers they had 5 minutes to clear out or I was calling the sheriff. They packed up quick. I don't blame them, they were just hired hands. But the nerve, the sheer audacity of that HOA to try another move after everything that already happened, that was the moment I realized this wasn't just about parking or power. This was about pride, about Kessler's bruised ego. The man had been embarrassed in TV, in court, online land. Now he was trying to win back control through back channels. He knew he couldn't win outright, so he was feeding half-truths to outside contractors, using maps with holes big enough to fall through, and hoping I'd eventually throw my hands up and let them have a slice of the land just to shut them up. But that's not how it works out here. You don't get to nibble a man's fence line. You don't inch in. You don't slide flags into his soil and expect him not to notice. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to make sure they never tried again. Not with me. Not with anyone. So I paid a visit to the county recorder's office. Again, this time, I brought everything: historic maps, notarized deeds, surveyor reports, the sheriff's signed incident record from the night of Teresa's trespass. I met with the clerk personally and requested an official GIS plot correction. They approved it. Then I requested a zoning reclassification for the entire stretch along my property, then designating it as agricultural utility land with restricted access. They approved that too. It took 72 hours, and when it was done, the county updated their system. That fuzzy gray strip, now marked in bold green. Boone Ranch, private, not for public use. I printed that map, laminated it, and dropped off a copy at the Sage Hills office. Didn't say a word, just set it on the receptionist's desk and walked out. Then I did something even better. I hired a land surveyor to install permanent concrete markers every 20 feet along the edge. Painted, numbered, registered with the county. You couldn't walk 5 steps along the property line without seeing one. Their little parking pad idea, dead in the dirt before it ever broke ground. But I still wasn't done, not until I heard it from the source. I showed up at the next HOA meeting, not as a guest, as a warning. Walked right into their clubhouse, past the fruit tray and the fake politeness, and stood in the back with my arms crossed. You should have seen their faces. Kessler went pale. Jerry tried to smile. A few residents whispered my name like I was the boogeyman. When public comment opened, I stepped forward, didn't raise my voice, didn't threaten. I just handed over a folder with the new zoning maps, the GIS corrections, and a written notice. Any future attempt to use my land physically or administratively would be met with full legal action and trespassing charges. Period. Kessler tried to object, but Jerry cut him off. "We understand," he said. "We'll update our records." That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from them. And it was enough. Because now, the battle wasn't just mine. It was public record. Black and white. Unshakable. They'd made the mistake of trying to turn my ranch into a parking lot. Now, I'd turned their neighborhood into a cautionary tale. By the time the new boundary markers were set in concrete and the zoning change hit the county website, it was like someone flipped a switch in Sage Hills. You'd think they'd accept defeat. But no, what came next wasn't just HOA desperation. It was HOA meltdown. Kessler vanished from the next few meetings. Rumor had it he'd been quietly asked to step down after his second letter from the sheriff's office landed on his desk. And just like that, Jerry, the accountant turned president, was left trying to clean up the mess with a board of angry residents and a bruised reputation. The email started up again. "Can we meet privately to discuss a compromise? Would you be open to a community agreement? One even offered me a modest compensation if I let them install a gravel lot on the edge of my land." I didn't respond to a single one. I wasn't negotiating. You don't hand back stolen goods with conditions. I'd already won the legal fight. Now I was focused on winning the message war. And nature? She gave me the perfect stage to do it. because the next week, the skies opened up and a hard spring rain rolled in like it had something to prove. Now here's the part the HOA never thought through. That gray zone they'd been fighting for, the one they wanted to turn into overflow parking, it sits just below the runoff slope from my east field. In dry weather, it's no big deal, just a little gravel and clay. But when it rains, the whole patch turns to soup. And because they'd already ripped up part of the land during their parking pad prep, the runoff came roaring down faster than they were ready for. It started with puddles. Then puddles became trenches. Then one evening, a Toyota Highlander got stuck rear tires, spinning mud like a blender, the driver panicking while 3 HOA members tried to push it free in khakis and loafers. I watched from my gate, didn't say a word, just leaned on the fence and sipped sweet tea while they wrecked their shoes and their pride. Word spread fast. The parking zone wasn't just closed, it was cursed. 2 more cars got stuck over the next few days. By the weekend, residents were putting up their own makeshift signs. Do not park here. Soft ground. I took a photo and added it to the wall in my barn. Beneath it, I wrote, Gravity, 1, HOA, 0. It didn't stop there. The mud caused more than just a few stalled vehicles. It backed up their drains, overflowed into their precious green belt, and turned the edge of their walking trail into a mini swamp. HOA families who used to let their kids play near the fence now kept them yards away. I overheard one woman say, "That ranch is a hazard zone now." I chuckled. It wasn't the ranch that was the hazard, it was the fools who tried to turn farmland into a parking deck. If they had respected the land from the start, none of this would have happened. And just in case they needed a little more reminding, I had a sign installed on my side of the fence facing the neighborhood. Not a warning, a lesson. Respect the land, or it will humble you. Beneath it, I planted a fresh row of wildflowers, the kind bees love, the kind HOA landscaping plans never account for. Residents started noticing. A few even complimented it. One older man tipped his hat as he walked by and said, "Nice to see someone knows how to treat land right." I nodded, said nothing, but it meant something. The tide wasn't just turning, it was shifting entirely. The HOA's final act of desperation came quietly. A letter slipped into my mailbox, no stamp, no return address, just a typed note on Sage Hill's letterhead that read, "Mr. Boone, in light of recent events and the unfortunate misunderstanding regarding property boundaries, the HOA formally withdraws all claims or interest in adjacent land to the east of Sage Hills. We regret any inconvenience." I didn't bother framing that one. I burned it in my fire pit. Because there's no satisfaction like watching their fake authority go up in smoke. I didn't need their apology. I didn't want their endorsement. I just wanted my land left alone. And now, finally, it was. The ranch was mine again fully, freely, and without intrusion. The battle wasn't just about fences or gates or gravel, it was about standing your ground, letting people know that not everything is up for vote, that history, sweat, and roots still mean something. And while Sage Hills may keep building, may keep planting their ornamental trees and HOA flags, they'll never forget the line they crossed. And the rancher who made damn sure they never crossed it again. A few weeks passed, and you'd think the world had finally returned to normal. The HOA went quiet, the construction flags disappeared. The edge of Sage Hills, once bustling with parking drama and clipboard-waving HOA members, looked like a ghost town. No more SUVs daring to trespass, no more entitled stares across the fence. The rain had turned my east field into a lush patch of green, and for the first time in months, the land looked the way it should undisturbed. I was halfway through fixing a gate hinge when a small silver sedan rolled up to my drive. Out stepped Jerry, the new acting HOA president, holding what looked like a folder and wearing that kind of expression men wear when they're about to do something they hate. I wiped my hands, leaned against the post, and waited. He walked up slow, like he didn't want to spook the cattle in the next pasture. "Mr. Boone," he said, clearing his throat, "I'm here on behalf of the Sage Hills Committee." I didn't say a word, just raised an eyebrow. He continued, "We'd like to formally request temporary use of a narrow strip of land near your west fence for an upcoming community event. Of course, with compensation. I almost laughed out loud. After all their threats, stunts, fake claims, and sabotage, now they wanted to ask. And they brought money. Jerry quickly opened the folder to show me a printed map of the area they were requesting, roughly 30 feet of open space along the far western fence line, mostly flat, right up against their neighborhood greenbelt. They wanted to use it as a staging area for some kind of weekend festival bounce houses, food trucks, lawn chairs. Nothing permanent, he promised. We'd handle cleanup, provide insurance. It's just, well, we don't have enough space within our approved zone. We thought maybe I let him talk, let him dangle in the awkwardness of it. Then I looked him dead in the eye and said, "So after all this, you're asking the guy whose land you tried to steal to lend you some?" He gave the weakest little smile I've ever seen. "We were wrong, and we're doing things differently now." I nodded, took the folder, closed it. "I'll think about it," I said, which was polite rancher speak for nope. He knew it too. But that wasn't the point. The point was that for the first time since this whole mess started, the HOA wasn't giving orders, they were asking permission. And that, my friend, was justice. After Jerry left, I sat on the porch with a cold beer and just watched the sun dip low over the fence line. That 30-foot strip they wanted, it was useless to me, barely grazable. But I wasn't about to forget what they did, how they tried to rewrite the rules, undermine my rights, and drag my name through the mud. You don't get to press reset just because you got caught. You live with the consequences. That's how things work out here. You build trust by not breaking it. And once you do, well, you better get comfortable eating crow. But the visit did get me thinking. Not about helping them, but about how many people in that HOA never wanted this fight in the first place. I'd started to notice little acts of goodwill. The neighbor who left a basket of eggs at my gate. The kid who waved every time he biked by. The older couple who started a native wildflower garden on their side of the fence. They weren't the problem. It was the board, the bureaucracy, the entitlement. So maybe it was time I showed them what real community looked like without giving up an inch of my land. I didn't respond to Jerry, but I did start something else. I called up a few friends, fellow landowners, folks with barns, tractors, chickens, and stories just like mine. We decided to host a little gathering, not a protest, not a spectacle, just a rancher's market. Free entry, local vendors only. Set up on my side of the property, facing the HOA with signs that read, "Everything HOA said was a nuisance right here. Come take a look." We had goats, we had honey, we had old tractors kids could climb on. And you know what? People came. From Sage Hills, even. Some came hesitant, some embarrassed, but they came. And they saw Usno as threats, not as backwards relics, but as neighbors. The line that once separated us, it didn't vanish, but it softened. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone at Sage Hills thinks about trying to take what isn't theirs, they'll remember the day they came to Boone Ranch and saw how land should be respected. The ranch market wasn't meant to prove a point, but boy, did it prove one. By noon, I had more people milling around my pasture than I'd seen at a county fair in years. City folks came in droves jogging stroller moms, dads in fishing shirts who hadn't fished a day in their lives, and curious retirees who looked like they just realized honey came from bees and not the store shelf. They bought eggs, fresh milk, locally baked bread, and more goat soap than I thought existed in the state. Kids ran around in the field, climbing on hay bales, petting goats, laughing like the world didn't come with HOA fees. And me, I stood off to the side, hands on my hips, hat tilted just right, and watched them all soak in what land really looks like when it's lived on, not managed. Nobody needed permission slips. Nobody measured grass height, and nobody got fined for having a dusty truck. Some of the Sage Hills folks even apologized. Not in words, those are hard for HOA types, but with smiles, grateful nods, and little gestures. One woman bought 6 pounds of tomatoes and said, "We're sorry this got so out of hand." I just nodded. Because forgiveness doesn't need speeches, it needs respect. And maybe that's what this had all been about. Not boundaries, not fences, not even the parking. It was about respect. The kind that used to come naturally when people looked each other in the eye instead of hiding behind committees and bylaws. These HOA folks had been sold the lie that they were the center of the world, that anything outside their little fence line was a threat, a mess to be cleaned, a nuisance to be managed. But land don't work that way. You don't box it in and expect it to play nice. You don't put up a sign and think it rewrites ownership. You walk it, you work it, you earn it. And today, for the first time, they saw what that looked like. A little girl from the neighborhood helped me carry pumpkins to the produce stand. Her mom asked if she could come by next week to see the calves. Even Jerry, the man who once tried to sneak in a parking lot under my fence, showed up hands empty, shoulders slumped, and helped haul hay for the goat pen. He didn't say much, didn't need to. He was just a man in a place he'd once tried to conquer, now doing chores like everyone else. The story started to ripple past the neighborhood. Local news came by again, filmed a short piece titled, "From Feud to Farm Stand: How a Rancher Won the HOA War with Goats and Grit." It went viral again. This time, not because of conflict, but because of community. A different kind. Not the kind with minutes and dress codes, but the kind where you share what you grow and help rebuild what others tore down. That same week, the county commissioner reached out to ask if I'd be interested in hosting a seasonal farm co-op. Said they wanted to bridge the rural-suburban gap. I told him I'd think about it. Because this land, it's still a working ranch. Still got cattle to tend, fences to mend, and no time for politics disguised as kindness. But maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't hurt to let folks see a bit of what they've been missing. Not as an act of charity. As a reminder that the world doesn't end at your cul-de-sac. That real community doesn't come from voting on mailbox colors. It comes from showing up, rolling up your sleeves, getting your boots muddy. And so, the fence stayed, the gate stood firm. But where there used to be tension, there was now curiosity. Where there used to be complaints, there were invitations. Kids from Sage Hill started helping at the ranch on weekends. One dad asked if he could trade labor for eggs. I told him, you bring tools, you leave with breakfast. Even the HOA newsletter changed its tone. Instead of pushing for zoning changes or restrictions, they started including blurbs about the ranch market. Called it a local gem. I nearly fell off my porch laughing, but deep down, I was proud. Not because I'd beaten them, but because I'd taught them. The best way to defend land isn't just with lawyers or cameras or fences, it's with legacy. And now, that legacy wasn't just mine. It was in every tomato sold, every goat petted, every kid who learned what real dirt felt like under their boots. They tried to turn my ranch into a parking lot. I turned their neighborhood into a classroom. And the land? It taught the lesson. The sky was pink with dusk when I took my last walk along the edge of the fence line. Same stretch of soil where the first SUV dared to plant itself months ago. Back then, it was just another part of my ranch ordinary dirt with a purpose. To grow, to hold, to last. But now, it was a monument. Not because of the legal win, the signs, or even the cattle that grazed nearby, but because it had become the one thing HOA board members never thought it could be: untouchable. The Sage Hills folks hadn't tried another stunt, not since the mud, the media, and the market showed them how deep these roots ran. Their HOA board held one final vote before officially dissolving its expansion committee. No more overflow parking initiatives. No more land grabs. Jerry sent me a final email short, simple, respectful. Thank you for your patience. We've learned a lot. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The land had done all the talking. And now it was silent again, the way I liked it. Still, strong, and mine. I spent the next few weeks just being. No fire to put out, no trespassers to chase. Just long days fixing fences, brushing the horses, and cleaning out the barn. The market became a monthly thing. Nothing fancy, no websites, just a few word-of-mouth regulars, a Facebook post or two, and enough traffic to keep things neighborly. It wasn't a statement anymore. It was just life. And funny enough, Sage Hills started showing up more than anyone. Folks who once wouldn't look me in the eye now came to buy eggs, chat about weather, even help with cleanup. One guy from Lot 12 brought his kid by to learn how to clean a feed trough. Said he wanted him to understand work. That one hit me harder than I expected. Because in the end, that's all this fight was ever about. Understanding. The land doesn't care what side of the fence you come from. It just wants to be respected. And once you learn to do that, well, you start respecting everything else. To history, ownership, boundaries, and people. There's an old saying my grandfather used to tell me, you don't own the land, you borrow it from your children. And for a while, it felt like Sage Hills was trying to rob me of that future. But now, as I stood on the ridge and watched the sun fall behind my cattle, I realized something. They didn't take anything. In fact, they'd given me more than they knew. They reminded me why I fight, why I protect, why I never let signs, suits, or smug grins redefine the borders of what's sacred. I'm not just a man who inherited dirt. I'm a steward, a wall against the tide of concrete and entitlement. And while they tried to pave their way onto this land, they ended up learning something far older than any HOA clause: you cannot pave over pride. The final marker I installed wasn't concrete or steel. It was a plaque, carved by hand, nailed to a cedar post right where the first car once parked. Boone Ranch, 1,911. Private land, not for sale, not for rent, never forgotten. That plaque wasn't for them. It was for me, for my granddad, for my future kids, if I'm lucky enough to have any. So they'll know exactly where the line is, not just in dirt and deeds, but in dignity. Because the next time some clipboard waving board tries to rewrite what's mine, I won't need to explain a thing. I'll just point to the plaque, and the land will do the rest. So to Sage Hills, and to every HOA that thinks a spreadsheet makes you king, take notes. Because I'm not your neighbor, I'm your reminder that not everything has a price, that not all land can be tamed, and that some fences don't just keep cattle in, they keep fools out. The land stands, the ranch lives, and Boone never bends. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next story.